How's it going, everybody, and welcome to The Walking Dead Iceberg. Since the inception of my channel a whopping 2 videos ago, I've wanted to do a Walking Dead video. You can ask anybody who's even remotely close to me and they'll tell you that I love The Walking Dead. When I say I love The Walking Dead, I mean I really love The Walking Dead. This is heavy. I'm also a big fan of Iceberg videos, so I figured this was a match made in heaven. Really quickly, I found this iceberg on Reddit from the user Lazy Mobile. Thanks a ton, and thanks a ton to all of you for watching this video. Oh, and this goes without saying, but major spoilers ahead for the main show, obviously, and for the other spin-offs as well, mostly Fear, a little bit of the other newer ones. So yeah, viewer discretion. Before I get into it, you'll notice that I might skip a few on each tier. This is just because I feel that there isn't much to talk about for some of these topics. Like, the first term you're going to see on the iceberg is literally just Rick Grimes. What are we doing? I also want to mention that as we get lower on the iceberg, the concepts we cover will get progressively more niche, but they'll also get more disturbing, I guess you could say. Nothing too bad, but a slight content warning. Days Gone By refers to the title of the first episode of the show, which is widely regarded as one of the best pilots ever made. But I think the point of it being on the iceberg is because it shares a name with the first issue of the comic. I actually happen to own this single issue of this one, so look how cool I am. This recurs a lot throughout the show, but it's one of the many neat callbacks to the comics, especially early on. The hospital is what Rick wakes up in the first episode. It has become one of the biggest landmarks for the series, especially the "Don't Open Dead Inside," or should I say, "Don't Dead Open Inside." I actually think it's such an underrated set design, and that goes for the entire series. You never see that talked about. It's always the characters and the makeup, which are absolutely amazing as well, but the set design throughout the whole thing is absolutely stellar. Atlanta refers to where the show takes place, but also just how overrun we see it is in the first few episodes of the show. Due to the Center for Disease Control being located in Georgia, the National Guard enacts a greater defense there, and becomes one of the largest refugee centers in the country. This is only a few days after the outbreak. Surely this won't have any dire consequences. Surely. Rick wakes up in the hospital around 60 days after the outbreak, and there's almost nobody still alive in the city. The entire refugee center is torn apart. The next installment is Rick's family, which was probably only here to mention the core members of his family during the apocalypse. Lori, Carl, Judith, and later on Michonne and RJ. But I want to use this to discuss a fun theory that I've always liked, that being that Madison Clark is actually Rick's sister. For those of you that don't know, Madison Clark is one of the main protagonists of The Walking Dead's first spin-off show, Fear the Walking Dead. Now, I don't blame you for not knowing her, since Fear is not the best, to say the least, but this isn't so much theory as it is just a fun thought. There's not much that backs this up, other than the facts that Madison and Rick kind of look similar. Madison's from Alabama, which is obviously near Georgia, and they both have very similar qualities as leaders. Now, Madison does have a bit more backstory than Rick pre-apocalypse, which all but confirms that this theory is incorrect, among other things, of course, but Madison's father was actually a senator who was an alcoholic and abused her and her mother. This culminated in Madison shooting her own father in the head. I think that probably would have come up a time or two with Rick, but who am I to say? The farm is one of the many locations our group holds up in throughout the show. It was owned by a fan favorite character, Herschel Green, and saw one of the most iconic scenes in the entire universe. The barn scene where Herschel had been trapping the Walker versions of his friends and family in his barn and feeding them livestock in hopes of a cure. This, of course, culminates in Shane breaking it open and slaughtering all of them. They're in the woo. I already mentioned this one, and now I feel kinda dumb, but "Don't Dead Open Inside," of course, refers to the scene in the hospital that has, at this point, been shrouded in infamy. Coral Memes refers to how Andrew Lincoln pronounces Carl's name throughout the show. Andrew Lincoln, of course, being the actor who plays Rick Grimes. With his deep southern accent, it sounds more like he's saying Coral rather than Carl, which caused many memes to ensue. Now, these are prime early 2010s memes right here. They don't make them like they used to. Little Zombie Girl is exactly what it sounds like. In the first episode of the series, Rick comes across a little girl who he thinks is a regular girl, but is actually a zombie, who he promptly kills. The same actress would return later on to play a zombie in Season 8, and the scene primarily serves to introduce Rick to this new, broken down world. It was also probably pretty crazy at the time to just show a dead kid on screen. On to Tier 2, the prison is another landmark for our group and probably the most iconic or popular. An abandoned prison that our group clears out and makes their home for about 2 seasons. prison state when the group first finds it brings up a bit of gruesome thought, as we see hundreds of inmates and guards ravaged by the virus, as they were stuck in the prison's walls. Judith is Rick and Laurie's daughter, who was conceived and born post-apocalypse. I'd have to think the reason she's on here is because of the debate, if you can call it that, surrounding who her biological dad is. Shortly after the apocalypse, Laurie and Shane were feeling a bit lonely, I guess you could say, and got it on. And I can't imagine that there was a lot of protection handily available at this time, which means that we're basically 99% certain that Judith is Shane's. Rick even says she is in season 7 or 8, I believe. Woodbury refers to the survivor community founded by Philip Blake, better known as the Governor, which was actually one of the most successful communities we see throughout the show, relatively speaking. The way they operated was by recruiting lone survivors, but capturing members of large settlements in the surrounding area, getting information out of them. We see this in full effect when they recruit Sasha and Tyrese, who were a small group at the time, but capture Glenn and Maggie, torturing info out of them. Carl Pudding Scene simply refers to a scene in Season 4, Episode 9, where Rick and Carl are on the road after the prison is overrun and destroyed. Rick is incapacitated, so Carl is left to his own devices. He finds some supplies and food, but at the end of the day, he finds a 112-ounce container of pudding and eats it on a rooftop. Now, there's an underlying, more sinister reality to this scene, and that is, how did Carl manage to eat this entire thing? I get it, it's the apocalypse and he's starving, but 112 ounces is absurd. The Governor's Walker daughter is, once again, exactly what it sounds like. The Governor's daughter, Penny, turns, and he ends up keeping her hidden in his quarters. He also employs Dr. Milton Mamet to experiment on walkers and the process of turning in an attempt to rehabilitate his daughter. I'm going to group the CDC and everyone is infected together since they go hand in hand. The CDC is the Center of Disease Control, which is located in Georgia, like I said. Our group ends up going to the CDC at the end of Season 1 in hopes of salvation, with the logic that it'd be the last defense, and they were right, but they were also too late. The area surrounding the CDC is riddled with dead civilians and soldiers, so many of them. There is one scientist left in the CDC, Dr. Jenner, who's still working for a cure. This is where Jenner reveals to the group, or I guess Rick, that everyone on Earth is infected already. The bite doesn't infect you, it just inflicts an incurable fever that kills you if you don't amputate the bite soon enough, and the virus reanimates you. This means that as long as your brain isn't severed, if you die you will come back, even without a bite. The next one is Morgan Jones, and I think from now on, if there isn't an obvious thing to talk about when it comes to a character, I'm just going to do a bit of a comparison to their comic counterpart. Morgan in the show is one of the longest running characters still around. He was introduced in the first episode and is still alive canonically. Him and his son are the first non-zombified humans that Rick encounters in the show, and he's been in and out of the show since then. His comic version isn't so lucky though. They follow a similar arc for the most part, barring a few things, but comic Morgan ends up being bit in the fight against the horde that overruns Alexandria. The group tries to amputate his arm, but it's too late. He loses too much blood and dies. One more thing I'll mention is that comic Morgan and comic Michonne actually end up bonding and eventually dating until his death, with Michonne killing him before he can reanimate. I'm sure you all know this next installment. Of course, walkers refer to the zombies in the show. The virus, which is called the wildfire virus, turns humans into reanimated monsters with an insatiable hunger for flesh. The only part of their brain that functions is the stem, which allows for basic motor functions, yet they lack other human characteristics like consciousness. They don't respond to pain, they can survive all critical injuries that aren't to the brain, they don't need food, water, or sleep to function. In the comics and game, they use the term zombie scarcely, but in the show, the concept of a zombie didn't exist prior to the outbreak. Lauren Cohen, the actress who plays Maggie, even stated in an interview that media like George A. Romero's numerous zombie films don't exist, hence why they never use the term zombie in the show. Kinda neat. Next up is Michonne, and I'm going to use this installment to talk a bit about her backstory and her flashbacks in Season 4. Season 4, Episode 9, we see what is one of the creepiest sequences in the whole show, I think. It opens with a vignette of a pre-apocalypse world where everything seems normal. Michonne is with her fiancé, baby, and a friend in their kitchen, until Michonne begins to sheath what we assume is a knife, but it's actually her katana. They have a strange conversation before her fiancé and friend turn back into her chained walkers that we see her carry around. Michonne also has a pretty tragic backstory surrounding her family. When we meet her, she's broken, assimilating to the other walkers using her chained up walkers, who, as we know, are her fiancé and friend that we see in the flashback. They got to this point because one day Michonne had gone on a supply run. While she was out, Mike, her fiancé, and their friend Terry were meant to watch Andre, their kid. Instead, they got high and neglected their child, causing him to be devoured by walkers when they overran their camp. Mike and Terry were bit in the process, so when Michonne returned from the supply run, she was distraught. A combination of resentment and unwillingness to let go of her loved ones caused her to use Mike and Terry as her chained walkers as a form of punishment. The prison/Woodbury War is the first major conflict between two human groups in the show, and it saw many deaths, around 70 altogether, including members of the prison, Woodbury, and the governor's militia. It concludes with the walkers claiming the prison, Woodbury largely burning down, and walkers also claiming it, and our group being split up, sent on the road to Terminus. Walker auditions simply refer to some videos released around 2015-2017 of people auditioning to play walkers in the show, and they just kind of look funny. That's it. That's the whole thing. The Walking Dead is a metaphor for the evolution of Western civilization, refers to the theory that the events of the show are supposed to mirror the progression of Western civilization. Each era of the show can be interpreted as an era of human civilization. The early seasons, particularly up until they get to the farm, is the hunter-gatherer era. They're nomadic, moving from campsite to campsite, constantly threatened by walkers. Then the group gets to the farm, representing the introduction of agriculture and settlements. Then we get to the more obvious ones. The prison in Alexandria is the formation of city-states and walled-off communities. The Saviors represent a sort of feudal system and a monarch type of ruler, and the Commonwealth is the reconstruction of society. Frank Darabont's firing, leading to Jeffrey DeMunn's character leaving the show, refers to the controversy between AMC and Frank Darabont, the showrunner of The Walking Dead for the entirety of Season 1 and the first episode of Season 2. AMC wanted to essentially have the show's budget through things like making the entirety of seasons set in one location, instead of moving around to a lot of sets like a film, among other budget cut strategies. They also wanted to double the show's episode count simultaneously, which Darabont didn't like, to say the least. Darabont, being a film director originally, brought a lot of actors and actresses from his previous projects, one of them being Jeffrey DeMunn, aka Dale. DeMunn justifiably believed that Frank's firing was unfair, so when Darabont sued AMC, he decided to quit the show out of support for his friend, which meant killing off Dale much earlier than he dies in the comics. You can really tell this decision was rushed and not the original intent for the character. Dale just hears a cow dying in the distance in the middle of the night, and he's like, yeah, I have to check this out by myself, and also I'm just gonna let a walker sneak up behind me and kill me. This is also 2 episodes before the season finale, though I did like the touch that the walker that kills Dale is the one that Carl taunts until he frees himself from the marsh earlier in the episode. This realization was a big turning point for Carl's character, so even in a very scuffed situation like that, they were still able to get some kind of positive out of it. Eugene Saves Everyone refers to one of the best character arcs in the entire show, where Eugene saves our group at the end of Season 8. So previously, Eugene is captured by the Saviors because he's the only one with the smarts to create new bullets. The Saviors' one downfall was their lack of weapons and ammunition, so Eugene was the only way they could turn the tide in the Savior War. But while Negan and the Saviors thought Eugene was forging bullets, he was actually sabotaging all of the ones he was making. So when the final battle rolls around in the finale of Season 8, it seems our group is cornered. The Saviors open fire, but their guns jam and break, explode in their hands due to Eugene's sabotaged bullets. This moment is absolutely electric when you're first watching it, and perfectly sums up one of the most underrated arcs and redemptions in the entire show. Morgan Jones's Fear the Walking Dead crossover is pretty straightforward. After Season 8 and the Savior War, Morgan leaves Virginia to get away from the violence and kind of find himself again after his family's death and his new outlook on life. So he joins Fear in their Season 4 premiere, where he was a main protagonist till the end of the series. A or B refers to the system that the CRM, or Civic Republic, implement when deciding who to recruit, similar to the Woodbury process that I mentioned earlier. And A is a strong, rebellious leader type of individual who would theoretically threaten the CRM. These individuals are either turned away completely by the CRM or are used for their sadistic experiments. B is a compliant survivor who could do grunt work in the CRM without threatening them. The most prominent appearance of this system in the main show is during Rick's departure in Season 9. Jadis finds Rick washed up on the river coast as she's about to be picked up to be taken back to her leadership role in the CRM. But she sees Rick and tells the helicopter pilot she has an A. But to save Rick's life, she quickly demotes him to a B and takes him with her to the CRM. Really quickly, the CRM is just like this big corporation kind of group of survivors who are trying to rebuild society in their own way, which is really cruel. We see the CRM in its full force in The Ones Who Live spin-off with Rick and Michonne, so yeah. Alexandria Safe Zone is simply the name of the main settlement throughout the show. Originally, Alexandria was a community quarantine zone established by the U.S. military specifically for politicians like Deanna Monroe, the Ohio congresswoman who was the original leader of Alexandria before her death when leadership was handed over to Rick. We first see Alexandria halfway through Season 5, and it persists as the main settlement for our group all the way to the end of the show in Season 11. Lori is eaten entirely by a walker refers to her death in Season 3, Episode 4, where she dies due to childbirth complications in the prison, so Carl has to shoot her before she turns. But when Rick gets back to her body, there's nothing there except for some blood and an absolutely huge, comically bloated walker. When I say there's nothing there, I mean there's nothing there. No scattered little flesh bits, and more importantly, no bones. He was hungry. Greg Nicotero, the art director of the show, later disclosed that the walker did eat Lori entirely, and that it was a production decision to convey the severity of the death without a lot of gore. Interesting choice. That's kind of what you're known for. Rick Grimes' coma dream theory is the theory that the events of the show are actually Rick's manifested dreams while he's still in a coma in the hospital. Kirkman has confirmed that this isn't true, but it's one of the oldest and most popular theories surrounding the show, and even the comic going back years and years now to the first issue. The telephone scene refers to a scene in Season 3, Episode 6. This is just after Lori died and Rick had been ravaging the overrun section of the prison, slaughtering numerous walkers in a sort of trance due to his grief. Rick ends up back in the boiler room where Lori died and a phone rings. He answers it and it's the voice of Amy, Andrea's sister who died in Season 1. She tells him that she's with the group somewhere safe and that she'll call him back at some point. Later, the phone rings again, but this time it's Jim, another member of the Atlanta group from Season 1. This time he asks Rick to explain why he killed the people he killed. He then berates him for being unable to talk about Lori's death and hangs up. Then he gets a third call, this time from Jackie, yet another Atlanta group member, who implores him to explain why he's unable to open up about Lori's death. Lastly, the final call he receives is from Lori, where he comes to the realization that all of the voices were from those who have died. This all being a manifestation of his grief. It's a wake-up call for Rick, and he returns to his daughter and the group. The Saviors is the name donned by Negan's community. They were a group of survivors with the sole purpose to bring civilization back through the scope of Negan and his ideologies. They boasted a brutal regime where they subjugated any other communities in the surrounding area, where they took a cut of their supplies like food, weapons, ammunition, in exchange for protection from walkers and other groups. The apocalypse has lasted for 12 years refers to the show's timeline corroborating over the span of 6 shows that the outbreak has lasted around 12 years. But this is only for the main show. It's generally believed that Season 11 finishes around 13 years in, but certain spin-offs like Dead City take place as much as 5 years after the events of Season 11. This Iceberg was posted 4 years ago, before the end of the show, so it was likely around 12 years at the time. But as of now, the latest point we've gotten to in the wider universe is around 18 to 20 years. Crazy. The virus comes from a space spore refers to how Robert Kirkman was able to get the comic published in the first place. In an attempt to get Image to publish his comic, he told him that it was about a zombie virus from space and that the story would eventually wrap around to involving aliens. But Kirkman never actually intended for the virus to come from space. In fact, he never intended for the reason for the apocalypse to ever be disclosed at all. Though after Kirkman stepped away from the show, they did all but confirm where the virus originated from in one of the spin-offs, World Beyond. Don't watch that one, by the way, it sucks. The virus in the show comes from some kind of experiment in a biochemical facility in France. There were many scrapped character arcs throughout The Walking Dead, just like any other long-running show. Andrea was actually meant to be a major player in the series along with Dale and, surprisingly, Lori. If you've read the comics, you know why Dale and Andrea were supposed to be more integrated into the story since they both lived much, much longer in the comic, but Lori dies at roughly the same time in the comic and the show. Tyrese and Sasha largely took over Dale and Andrea's intended roles. Originally, Carol was intended to die in Season 3 instead of T-Dog, in a similar way to her suicide death in the comics. But the production team liked Melissa McBride's performance as Carol so much that they kept her around. Thank God, by the way. The writers considered killing Carl from the gunshot wound at the beginning of Season 2, and even considered killing Judith with Lori in childbirth. It seems the studio wouldn't allow Judith to die in the same way as her comic death, which is understandable, but they would have allowed her to die much less brutally in childbirth. The final one I'll mention is that Carl was supposed to be a main character all the way to the end of the show, like his comic counterpart, but the network fired Chandler because they are greedy, money-sucking, evil vampires who ruin the show. Screw you, AMC. Rick Grimes' throat scene refers to a scene in the season 4 finale where Rick rips Joe, the leader of the Claimers, throat out as a last-ditch effort to save Carl, Daryl, and Michonne. This is easily my favorite scene in the show, and it's from the best season in my opinion. If you can believe it, Andrew Lincoln didn't actually rip somebody's throat out in that scene, but they did use raw chicken to simulate the throat meat. Piss in our pants yet refers to one of many iconic Negan quotes from the lineup scene. It's actually his first line right after he walks out of that RV, followed by, think it's gonna be pee-pee pants city here real soon. I think if Robert Kirkman asked me for my kidney, I'd give it to him, no questions asked, simply because he created this scene. Stuff and Things refers to a meme within the community. In the season 3 premiere, Lori tries to talk to Rick about some things, assumedly about the baby, to which Rick responds saying that he's doing stuff and things with his uber southern accent. It was memed because Lori's trying to talk about like really important stuff to Rick, you know, their baby being birthed in the apocalypse, but Rick's too busy doing stuff and things. But in reality, Rick was just kind of mocking Lori by repeating things, and she said that too. Lucille, I'm assuming, refers to how Negan's barbed wire bat got its name. Lucille was the name of Negan's late wife from pre-apocalypse who died during the beginning of the apocalypse, since she had cancer and couldn't get the proper treatment that she needed. The show actually did a whole episode about this in season 10, which is one of the best in the series in my opinion, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan's actual wife, Hilary Burton, played Lucille. The Walking Dead takes place in the same universe as Breaking Bad refers to the theory that both of these AMC shows take place in the same universe. There's a few things that started this theory. For one, we can see the Blue Sky Meth and Merle's secret stash in season 2, episode 2. In the season 4 episode Still, Daryl mentions a janky little white tweaker who some people think could be Jesse or Skinny Pete. In season 9, we hear the song Lydia the Tattooed Lady, which is also Todd's ringtone in Breaking Bad. We also see Glenn sporting a red Dodge Challenger in season 1, the same one as Walt Jr. in Breaking Bad. Finally, Stephen Ogg stars in both The Walking Dead and Better Call Saul, where he plays a character of similar skill sets and personalities, leading people to believe that they are the same person pre- and post-apocalypse. Now, this is obviously just a fun thought. Both shows are made by AMC, so this is just Easter eggs from Breaking Bad. Pretty sure this was confirmed on a Talking Dead episode as well, so still a fun thing to think about, but definitely not true. Daryl unknowingly alludes to where Sophia's corpse is, refers to a scene in season 2, episode 3, where Andrea feels the need to express how doubtful she is that the group will be able to find Sophia. Very helpful, thank you, Andrea. But Daryl interjects and says that it's not the mountains of Tibet, it's Georgia. She can be held up in a farmhouse somewhere. As we know, Sophia was in fact held up in a farmhouse somewhere. Helicopters can apply to a few things. In early seasons, we see helicopters in the first and third seasons. It's believed that the first appearance in season 1 is thought to be implemented by Darabont, who is now fired. But we see a crashed helicopter from a militant group that survived in the beginning of the apocalypse in season 3, which is the same helicopter from season 1 that led the horde from Atlanta to Herschel's farm, then crashed and the governor killed them, because that's what the governor does. Then we don't see any helicopters till season 8, and all of the helicopters we've seen since season 8 are believed to be from the CRM. Now, again, this Iceberg was likely made before the end of the show and all the spin-offs, yada yada yada, so I highly doubt it refers to this, but I thought I'd just throw it in anyway. Michonne's Negan hallucination refers to a scene in season 10, episode 13. After Michonne is drugged by Virgil, she hallucinates what her life would have been like had she not helped Andrea in that forest back in season 2. We see her let Andrea die, then her as the orange backpack hitchhiker who Daryl and Rick let die. Negan later picks her up and she rises the ranks to where she's at the satellite station that the group hits in the night in season 6, where she watches her friends die but kills Glenn and Heath in the process. We then see the lineup scene, except instead of Negan doing the watermeloning, it's Michonne, and she kills herself instead of Glenn. Finally, we see Michonne in the Savior War where she's killed by Daryl and Rick. My favorite part of the sequence is that even in this hallucination of a parallel universe, Daryl still doesn't die, baby, yeah. Look at the Flowers refers to a devastating scene in season 4, episode 14. Carol has taken the motherly role to Lizzie and Mika, but Lizzie isn't quite acclimated to the apocalypse. She still sees the walkers as conscious people who are equal to humans. She thinks they can still be friends. So when Lizzie stabs her sister so she can turn into a walker and they can be friends, Carol has to make a tough decision. At this time, the group is split up on the road to Terminus after the destruction of the prison, so Carol and Tyrese are looking after Lizzie, Mika, and baby Judith. Carol decides that there's no way to make sure that Lizzie doesn't attack her and Tyrese, or even worse, Judith, especially after threatening Judith with a knife already. So she does what she thinks has to be done. Carol tells Lizzie to turn around, look at the flowers, then shoots and kills her, of Mice and Men style. Grady Memorial Hospital refers to a story arc and location in the main show. It was the largest hospital in Atlanta. When the outbreak began, Atlanta PD secured it, and it survived as a solid and safe group for a few years post-apocalypse. Under Officer Dawn Lerner, they ran a bit of a cruel regime. Any survivors they found in need of medical attention, they would save and take back to their hospital, where they would act as indentured servants till they paid off their debt. On the surface, that seems like a fine deal, but in reality, many of the officers would physically and sexually assault the servants. Dawn would reluctantly look past this in fear of being killed or stripped of her power. They would also purposefully prevent some servants from leaving the hospital, even after paying off their debt, constantly moving the goalpost as to keep them doing their bidding. We see this regime in action across the span of Season 5 after an injured Beth is abducted by the Grady officers, where she's subject to work off her debt, ultimately culminating in the group trying to save her. But when Dawn refused to let her go, along with her friend she met in the hospital, Noah, back with our group, she attacks Dawn, causing her to be shot and killed, and our group subsequently shooting and killing Dawn. This arc is generally revered as one of the worst in the show. It's just super boring and bogs down what's otherwise one of the best seasons through the entirety of the series. Terminus refers to the main antagonist group from the end of Season 4 and beginning of Season 5. Our group is on the road and split up after the prison is destroyed. They all see signs advertising a sanctuary and a map to said sanctuary. But when they get there, it's, like you could have guessed, a trap. Turns out Terminus is actually a group of cannibals who lure victims to their secured fortress, where they butcher and eat them. We learned from the leader of Terminus that it actually originated as a real sanctuary, as advertised, but when bandits took advantage of their kindness by stealing their supplies, imprisoning and torturing them, they decided that when they took their home back, they wouldn't be so kind anymore. And yet I smile is the recurring motto from one of the main survivors of our group, Ezekiel. We first see this used in early Season 8 when hyping up the kingdom before an assault on the saviors, as a line in his big speech. This speech is incredibly well written and really drives home Ezekiel as one of the best leaders in the show, as well as perfectly summing up the optimism and belief he had in his community. 4 Walls and a Roof is the name of the 3rd episode in Season 5. I believe it's on the Iceberg because this is probably the most brutal point we see our group in, outside of maybe the satellite base massacre. This is the culmination of the Terminus arc. Rick and the group have Gareth and the surviving members of Terminus on their knees, surrendering and begging for their lives in a church of all places. Despite their helpless state, Rick keeps his promise that he was going to kill Gareth with his machete with a red handle, as he and a few other members of the group slaughter them all. Like I said, this is often regarded as the most savage and inhumane state our group is in the entire show, since they had been on the road for months and months at this point. On to Tier 5. I Hear Nebraska's Nice refers to Season 2, Episode 8, when Rick obtains his first human kills. Rick and Herschel encounter 2 survivors in a bar who are part of a bit of a larger group. They ask Rick if they have a larger group, which him and Herschel don't like. They try to deny it, they try to change the subject, but the 2 nomads keep pressing them, until they begin to threaten Rick. Rick tells them that they can't bring them into their group and that he hears Nebraska's nice, not too overrun. That's when the 2 men draw their weapons, but they're too slow for Rick, who dispatches them quickly. This is such a great way for Rick to get his first human kills in the series. He had no choice. Heads on Pikes refers to a very major event where Alpha kidnaps 8 residents of the kingdom, later 3 members of the Highwaymen, then decapitates them and sticks their zombified heads on pikes for the rest of their group to find. Don't get me wrong, this is still a great scene in the show and very impactful. Some of the larger deaths include Henry, Enid, and Tara, but this scene is so much better in the comic. The comic's build-up is much better, and there's more impactful characters that die here. I like Henry, but him being the most impactful death is kind of rough, while the comic saw some absolute mainstays killed off like Ezekiel and Rosita, along with some other minor characters like Olivia. The Scavengers' Broken English refers to Jadis' group of trash scavengers introduced in Season 7, who spoke broken English. Now, I'm pretty sure this was never fully explained, but there's many theories as to why. The leading theory is that it was some sort of manipulation tactic. Jadis and her group were very mysterious and rarely let new people in, so talking this way is thought to be a way to throw the strangers they meet off balance. They act dumb when they actually aren't, to make people think that they don't know what they're doing. After the Scavengers fall and some of them are assimilated into our group, like Jadis, they go back to speaking regular English, which definitely implies that it was a purposeful tactic. Carl was nearly raped by one of the Claimers refers to a scene in the Season 4 finale, the same one where Rick bites Joe's throat out, but just before that, one of the other Claimers named Dan holds Carl at knife point. Joe tells Rick they're going to kill Daryl, then have Michonne and the boy. As you can hear Dan unbuckling his belt. Now, it's clearly pretty heavily implied in the show, but it's very direct to his intentions in the comics. Thankfully, though, as we know, Rick brutally murders all of them. Everybody say thank you, Rick. Stephen King refers to the author's connection and love for the show. Firstly, you can find a copy of his book The Stand in Season 4, Episode 9. Beyond that, there's a lot of crossovers between King's live-action adaptations and The Walking Dead. Frank Darabont directed 4 King films, including The Mist, Night Shift, Shawshank Redemption, and The Green Mile. Greg Nicotero, the acclaimed makeup and VFX artist who has worked on The Walking Dead since the very first episode, previously worked on 5 King projects, and a number of actors previously worked on King projects, including Michael Rooker, Jeffrey DeMunn, Laurie Holden, Melissa McBride, Chandler Riggs, and Michael Cudlitz, among more. Cherokee Rose refers to a scene in the Season 2 episode, fittingly named Cherokee Rose. The group is still trying to find Sophia. Daryl comes back from tracking her down, but he's empty-handed other than a single white flower. This flower being the Cherokee Rose. Daryl gives the rose to Carol and tells her about how it got its name. It is said to be a symbol of hope that blooms from the tears of the Cherokee mothers who lost their children to disease and starvation on the Trail of Tears after they were driven off their land by the white man. Decaying title screen refers to how the title screen increasingly decays in the series as the series progresses. From seasons 1 through 9, the title screen decays further and further every season until season 9, where we see the title become cleaner as it's overgrown with plants and foliage, symbolizing a new era of the show, post-Savior War, where our group is rebuilding the new world. They're effing with the wrong people refers to an alternate version of the final scene of the season 4 finale A. Rick and the group are captured by Gareth at Terminus and locked into a container. The scene ends with Rick saying they're gonna feel stupid when they find out, to which Abraham asks, why is that? And Rick says, they're effing with the wrong people.
They're gonna feel pretty stupid when they find out. Find out what? They're fucking with the wrong people.
But you may have remembered this scene a little differently. While when that episode aired on March 30th, 2014, that is the line that Rick said. It has since been altered by AMC in reruns, Netflix, and anywhere else that you can watch this episode where Rick says they're screwing with the wrong people instead.
They're screwing with the wrong people.
AMC be like, Rick can say the hard R in season 1, but a single F-bomb at the peak of its viewership? No, impossible. Noah's death scene, I believe, simply refers to how brutal it was and possibly how mundane some people thought it was. Glenn and Noah, newly acclimated to the Alexandria safe zone, are on a supply run with a few of the original members of Alexandria. Now, this is basically right after Beth dies for Noah and the episode where Tyrese dies at Noah's former camp at the hands of Noah's zombified brother. Glenn and Noah get in a bit of trouble on the supply run where Noah gets stuck in a revolving door along with Glenn. Nicholas is stuck in the opposite compartment, but they're sandwiched by a horde from the inside and outside of the building. All Nicholas has to do is keep the door steady while Glenn breaks the glass to set them free, but Nicholas, being the inexperienced dumbass that he is, forces his way outside, which allows the walkers to flood into Glenn and Noah's compartment, where Noah is grabbed and ripped apart by the walkers. He tells Glenn, "Don't let go," but it's too late as Glenn watches Noah get brutalized through the glass. Some fans believe this death was unneeded and poor, but I think it's classic Walking Dead if you ask me. This, at least for me, is one of the biggest reasons I love the show and comic, because no character feels safe at any point, except Rick and Daryl, of course. It also serves to develop Glenn's character a bit more at this time. Fake character death controversies refers to AMC filming a death scene for each character in the lineup scene. During the downtime between the season 6 finale and season 7 premiere, which lasted around a year, believe it or not, there was a lot of speculation as to who was gonna die, along with a lot of leaks. There was many supposed leaks of Negan bashing the heads in of many of the 11 characters present in the scene, the biggest one being Maggie. She had the most belief behind her leak. But it was later revealed that AMC recorded a death scene for every character involved in the scene, and possibly even leaked their own false scenes to throw fans off the scent of the real deaths that happened. The "You Got No Guts" refers to a scene in Season 7, Episode 8, where Negan marches into Alexandria. Spencer, fed up with Rick's leadership, decides he's going to confront Negan and attempt to get Rick out of power. Negan finds this stunt insulting, so he asks Spencer why he doesn't just kill or overthrow Rick himself and take the power. Spencer stutters, but Negan says he knows why Spencer won't do it. It's because he has no guts. Then proceeds to stab him in the abdomen and rip him wide open, causing his guts to spill out. And Negan, being Negan, exclaims that the guts were inside him the whole time and that he's never been so wrong in his whole damn life. Welcome to the Dog Trot / Rich Bitch refers to a gruesome scene in Season 4, Episode 12, Still. Daryl and Beth are on the road to Terminus when they find the Pine Vista Country Club. The once prestigious Georgia Golf Country Club, now dilapidated and run down. We see the club trashed with bodies shot and hung all around the building and its courses. But this isn't just like every other abandoned building in the apocalypse, as we see graffiti painted on the seemingly mutilated bodies and walls reading, "Welcome to the Dog Trot," a term for a small, cheap house, and "rich bitch," implying that the mistreated workers turned on their bosses and customers after the outbreak, really murdering them and ransacking the place. Beta is a celebrity refers to exactly that. Beta, pre-apocalypse, was a famous country singer. We even see a vinyl record with his face on it in Fear the Walking Dead briefly, and in the main show, when a fellow Whisperer recognizes his true identity, Beta kills him since he was so devoted to the Whisperer lifestyle and assimilating to his new zombified identity. He's also a celebrity in the comics, just a different one. Instead, he was a famous basketball player. Tyrese's hallucination refers to his death in Season 5, Episode 9. Tyrese is bitten by Noah's zombified brother. While he's bleeding out, he struggles internally with some of the decisions he's made during the apocalypse. He hears stories on the radio and is visited by Bob, Beth, Mika, Lizzie, the governor, and Martin, who discuss some of his actions. Tyrese begins talking to his hallucinations. His dead friends attempt to comfort him, telling him he did the right thing, that the afterlife is much better than living in the apocalypse. But the governor and Martin antagonize him, saying he could never do what needed to be done and that he was too soft for this world. Eventually the group gets back to him and Michonne amputates his bitten arm. They clumsily carry the large man back to their car, but he's lost too much blood. On their drive back to the camp, Tyrese is again comforted by hallucinations of Bob, Beth, and the girls, and the radio is back on. Tyrese tells Bob to turn it off, essentially letting go as he dies in the backseat of the car. Tainted Meat refers to yet another iconic scene in the 3rd episode of Season 5, where Bob is captured by what's left of our favorite cannibalistic antagonist, and his leg is amputated and barbecued by Gareth. What Gareth and what's left of Terminus didn't know is that Bob was infected when they ate him, so when Bob realizes what they did, he begins to crack up. They ask him why he's laughing. Bob replies with,
Well, you lost it.
Well, lasted longer than I thought he would.
You idiot.
Okay, keep it down. I can shut him up.
I've been bitten, you stupid pricks. I'm tainted meat.
Robert Kirkman has confirmed that the tainted meat wouldn't have infected the group in the first place, but it caused paranoia and dread that also subsequently made the group rush their plans to fully get back at Rick, resulting in what we talked about in Four Walls and a Roof. Now on to Tier 6. I See Red refers to Episode 12 of Season 3, Clear, where we see Morgan's return. Rick, Michonne, and Carl find Morgan holed up in a booby-trapped block, except he's gone fully off the deep end. He keeps talking about having to clear certain areas of all the walkers, and how he sees red and even tries to kill his former friends. Later we find out it's because he was too weak to put down his zombified wife, so when his son Dwayne was confronted by her, he too couldn't finish the job and got bit. Morgan blames himself for this and completely breaks him mentally. We see this psychosis actually return in Season 8 of Fear the Walking Dead as well. I guess your wife and kid dying probably is pretty hard to get over. Hyundai advertising refers to Hyundai sponsoring the show and its companion after show for a few seasons, resulting in some slightly out of place product placement to say the least. Starting in Season 2 up until Season 4, we see a 2011 Hyundai Tucson that is alarmingly clean and in pristine shape for an apocalypse. So if you remember watching those early seasons, seeing a green 2011 Hyundai Tucson, this is why. There's even a bit where Dale and Shane are feuding, so Dale tells him, "You have your nice new car, you should just take it and leave." Very subtle, Dale. Jocelyn's group refers to a minor antagonist group in season 9 consisting of children. Jocelyn, who was a former friend of Michonne's, leads a cult-like group of battle-hardened children who she's manipulated into doing her bidding. They believe that the next generation needs to be stronger. The children put on a facade as innocent kids and lure in unsuspecting victims until they strike and kill them. I don't know if there's a single thing that this show hasn't done at this point. Pope marked you refers to an order sent by Pope for the Reapers to capture or kill you. Reapers are an antagonist group led by the Pope, who is a deranged sociopath caused by trauma from his time in Afghanistan and from the apocalypse. He also twists Christianity to sort of justify to himself as to why he does what he does. He and his group survived the outbreak in Operation Cobalt, initially in a church, which led him to believe that he and his group were the chosen one, and even refers to himself as God sometimes, hence his name. When the Pope marks you, it's a death sentence. We see this firsthand when a Reaper who Maggie captured tells her, "The Pope marked you," before committing suicide. Maggie and her group were later hunted by the Reapers, causing them to flee. Man, the Reapers had such an awesome introduction. They were so cool in season 10, and the writers just had no idea what to do with them as the story moved into the Commonwealth arc. They just ended up doing nothing, kind of dying for no reason. Negan merch controversy refers to a shirt that AMC dropped in 2017 that simply read, "Eeny, meeny, miny, mo," with a bloody barbed wire bat. Now you're probably hearing this and remembering the lineup scene, blah blah blah, but it's a Negan quote, an iconic moment, but some dude in the UK saw it and claimed it was racially motivated. While it is true that at one point racists did use the quote as a derogatory term, replacing tiger in the original lyrics with a word that I'm sure you can think of, this is very clearly not what AMC meant at all. Nevertheless, most stores pulled the merch, though Jeffrey Dean Morgan did take to Twitter at the time and said, "Holy crap, some people are stupid." Just more evidence as to why JDM is goated. Negan may watermelon some people, but he is not a racist. Dwayne Jones Whiskey refers to an Easter egg in season 10, episode 19. Gabriel and Aaron are playing some cards and drinking some whiskey, but if you look at the bottle closely, you can see the brand is Dwayne Jones Bourbon. Dwayne Jones, of course, being Morgan's dead son, who was like 8 years old when he died. Dwayne Jones is also the lead actor in Night of the Living Dead, so yeah. Daryl doesn't exist in the comics is exactly that. Daryl is probably the third most popular character in the show behind Rick and Negan, but it also might be a three-way tie. He is a mainstay in the horror community, even outside of just the show. He survived throughout the entire show and is even going to have 4 seasons of his own spin-off. So it might come to you as a surprise that he is completely original to the show. Absolutely their best addition. It's also thought that Daryl was probably supposed to die around season 1. This is because Norman Reedus, the actor who plays Daryl, originally auditioned for the role of Merle, Daryl's brother.
Ourselves a little powwow, people. Talk about who's in charge. I vote me. It's democracy. Now let's see a show of hands. All in favor?
Darabont ended up giving that role to Michael Rooker, but he liked Norman so much that he created a new role for him, being Daryl, to fill out the Atlanta camp in season 1. Norman was also credited as a guest star in the first season, so safe to say he probably originally wasn't supposed to stick around for too long, but a combination of a Norman Reedus masterclass and high approval from the fans likely kept him around, and thankfully so. Morales' return refers to Morales from season 1 returning and dying in season 8 as a savior. A lot of fans found his return unnecessary. I think it serves to convey Rick's point that anybody in the core 3 communities could have been a savior under different circumstances. Carl died for nothing is a sentiment that most fans share. Now, the official reasoning from longtime showrunner Scott Gimple is for the story reasons, but that's almost certainly not the case. Firstly, Carl is essentially the main character of the comics, especially once we hit the Savior War, and is probably the most important character in the Whisperer and Commonwealth arcs. So killing him makes zero sense creatively. The leading and most likely theory is, as I mentioned earlier, that Chandler Riggs, Carl's actor, was turning 18 during filming of season 8, which would have meant a much more lucrative contract for him. So the studio killed him to prevent that. Not only that, but Riggs and his family had just bought a house in Atlanta before he was fired because they had discussions with AMC before buying the house, so we can assume they indicated he would be a mainstay on the project. On top of all that, Carl dies, saving Sadiq of all people, who might be the most nothing burger character in the entire show. Moral of the story is, all these giant companies are greedy douchebags. How many walkers have you killed, how many people have you killed, and why refers to the question that Rick asks hopeful newcomers to the group/community. They serve to evaluate if a person is fit for survival in the apocalypse and has fully acclimated. The walker question serves to find out if you know what walkers are. If you're keeping count, it shows that you have some kind of guilt, or it shows that you haven't killed many walkers, implying you've been sort of sheltered. The people and why segments go hand in hand. Obviously, if you say, I've killed 50 people because I like it, then you're crazy, but if you say, I've killed X amount of people because they threaten me or my family, then yeah, that's acceptable. You realize the reality of the world that you're in today. Negan ultimately becomes Judith's father figure, refers to Negan and her's connection after Rick's disappearance. Once Rick blows up the bridge and disappears in the 5th episode of season 9, there's the 6-year time skip which sees Judith go from a small child to around 9 or 10. She ends up making a connection with Negan while he serves his life sentence in prison. He eventually saves her and becomes a regular member of society, where their father-daughter-esque relationship grows further. It's obviously a little ironic and kind of sad that the man Rick had a literal war with ends up being the most present father figure in her life. 3rd one, by the way. But she does serve to help Negan redeem himself and become a better person, so it's a win-win in my book. Down to tier 7 now. The Day Will Come When You Won't Be is the title of the season 7 premiere, aka the episode where we saw the lineup scene. But that's not the full story. If we go all the way back to the season 1 finale, TS19, after Jenner opens the blast doors for our group to leave before the self-destruction of the CDC, Rick turns to Jenner and tells him, "I'm grateful." Jenner responds with, "The day will come when you won't be." Some chilling foreshadowing and an excellent touch to an already awesome episode. Johnny Depp's decapitated head refers to a prop in season 6 episode 12 where our group is looking for a zombified, disembodied head that resembles the Hilltop's leader at the time, Gregory. One of the prop zombie heads used was actually modeled after Johnny Depp's face in real life, so Norman Reedus actually kept the head after production as well. It's always been my headcanon that this is actually Johnny Depp's head in universe, but that's never confirmed. Rick and co. are actually psychotic serial killers refers to the theory that Rick and the group are actually the bad guys. Some people think that the group infects other survivors with their ideologies, which leaves destruction in their path. The farm falls, the prison falls, Alexandria enters a war right after the group joins, etc., etc. If there is a god, he will have to beg for my forgiveness refers to the usage of said quote in The Walking Dead. Quote originates from the Holocaust, where it was found on the wall of a concentration camp to symbolize that the act of the Holocaust was so evil that if there was a god, he should be held accountable for this evil. We see this quote in the show in the premiere of the final season, where the quote is visible as graffiti in a subway tunnel, likely to symbolize the coming conflict with the Reapers and later the Commonwealth. But it also connects to Negan's character remarkably well. Negan suffered a great tragedy when Lucille died of cancer, sending him down his path as a ruthless dictator with the Saviors. It also reflects his mindset while he was leader of the Saviors as a sort of divine being. He knew he was doing a terrible act, but he saw it as a necessary evil. He is the god that must beg for forgiveness. This next one, titled Napkins Foreshadowing, is interesting. I'm not gonna lie, I could barely find anything that pertains to this title, but I did find one singular Tumblr post that contains a theory connected to napkins in the show. And it's honestly pretty clever, so I'm going to cover it, but it could be talking about something completely different for all I know, so take it with a grain of salt. In the season 7 premiere, where Glenn and Abe get watermeloned, we also see a vision/alternate timeline from Rick's point of view, where they never encounter the Saviors and our group is having a beautiful picnic in the Alexandria greenery. Looking closer though, everyone at the table either has a neat napkin on their plate or no napkin due to food already being on their plate. That is everyone except Glenn, Abraham, and Sasha. They all have an inside-out or differently colored napkin. Obviously, in this episode, Glenn and Abraham die, so it makes sense for their napkins to be different from everyone else. But why Sasha? Well, Sasha would later die at the hands of Negan and the Saviors in the finale of that same season, hence the foreshadowing. Morgan foreshadows the Whisperers refers to something Morgan says in the same episode we talked about earlier, season 3, episode 12, Clear. As we know, Morgan is broken and psychotic at this time, so when Rick is finally able to speak to Morgan, he asks him if he sees him and if he sees who he is. Morgan responds saying, "People wearing dead people's faces." Feels like a direct reference to the Whisperers, doesn't it? It's likely just Morgan not believing Rick is actually there in his psychosis, given the Whisperers weren't even around in the comics at the time, but it's cool to think about Morgan encountering the Whisperers all the way back in season 3, especially since we really don't know how long the Whisperers had been around for. Daryl's cookbook hallucination is one of my favorite entries on the entire Iceberg, because it is messed up. In season 10, after Daryl, Michonne, and Carol meet with Alpha at the border of their two communities, they head back to Alexandria but are forced to take shelter and ride out the night. In this abandoned building, Carol picks up a book seemingly about home economics, But as we look closer, Carol and the audience see the cover shift to all of Carol's previous 5 children, or children that she played a motherly role to: Mika, Lizzie, Henry, Sophia, and Sam, in their dead or zombified states. Purple Shirt Walker refers to a few things. Likely refers to Frank Darbon's original direction for walkers as a whole. If you've ever wondered why walkers feel more intelligent or stronger or something in the first season, that's because Darbon originally wanted the walkers to interact with the environment and still have some kind of connection to their past lives. We see both of these in the first season. We can see walkers using rocks to break the mall doors, and the Purple Walker himself sitting in a bus just chilling when Rick arrives in Atlanta, suggesting that maybe he rode the bus pre-apocalypse. It's just funny to me the idea that this walker in a napalmed, basically nuked Atlanta remembered how he used to get to his 9 to 5. The other cool thing pertaining to the Purple Shirt Walker is that it's likely an homage to a walker we see in the first issue of the comic. Martin was right about Tyrese refers to how Martin, one of the Terminus cannibals who held Judith hostage, told Tyrese that his inherent kindness would get him killed. He's the kind of guy who saves babies. He's not strong enough to kill him to keep Judith out of danger, let alone himself, and that's what will be the end of him. He can't acclimate to this world. And Martin wasn't wrong in a sense. Tyrese later dies because he told Noah not to go to his old house. He'd be too emotional. But when Noah goes, he follows blindly, and when he gets to Noah's house, he sees a picture of Noah and his brothers. He's distracted by this picture, which allows Noah's zombified brother to bite and eventually kill him. This moment could be looked at as weakness due to his nature. He tried to help Noah, and the distraction of feeling bad for Noah could be seen as why he was killed. I'm just going to briefly touch on this next one. Judith isn't Rick's biological daughter, pretty well known. We covered it briefly earlier, but Judith was almost certainly Shane's biological daughter from his time with Lori before Rick gets to the Atlanta camp. T-Dog's death was originally meant for Carol is pretty on the nose. His death was originally written for Carol, but Sarah Wayne Callies, Lori's actress, lobbied for her survival, which likely caused her to live. It's no surprise to comic fans that she was supposed to die during the prison arc, since she dies in a relatively similar way to T-Dog's death in the comics. Children implied to be killed and eaten at Terminus refers to the evidence for exactly that. When Carol infiltrates the Terminus complex, we see in the belongings/storage area a table seemingly full of children's stuff like stuffed animals and even clothes. Also, when the termites capture Bob and eat his leg, Gareth taunts him and uses an analogy to justify their cannibalistic cult. He says, bears will eat their young instead of surviving. Mama bear dies, so do the cubs, but if the mama eats the cub, she can always have more. Now you can take that literally as proof of them eating kids, or more generally as them trying to save humanity by eating humanity. Either way, I think it's definitely heavily implied, and absolutely something The Walking Dead and Kirkman wouldn't shy away from. Robert Kirkman has been trying to kill off Judith since season 3 refers to Robert Kirkman going on record saying that when he was still involved in the show, he pitched Judith's death numerous times. This does make sense since Judith was killed off during the prison arc in the comics as an infant, though Kirkman did admit that he felt the writers made the right move, which I agree with. She's easily one of the best parts of the show after the time skip and Rick's departure. I do just want to say, the actual quote from Kirkman that's started this whole thing, the real quote is, "I tried to kill that damn baby. It's not even a baby anymore. I pitched the death of Judith so many times, it's not even funny." There's actually something wrong with this guy. The Vatos were raided and killed refers to a deleted scene from early season 2 where the group goes back into Atlanta but have to seek shelter quick, so Rick takes everyone back to their old friends at the nursing home. When they get there though, everyone is slaughtered and the place is ransacked. In the comics, I'm pretty sure the governor kills them. That is, if the governor companion books are canon. But we don't know for sure who did it in the show. There's obviously speculation that the governor also killed them in the show, hence why he picked up Merle later on, but that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Why would the governor and Woodbury go back to the city? We also know that Merle took a car, so they likely just picked him up on the road. I like to think that it was Don and the Grady Memorial Hospital. That just seems more plausible to me. Some of the deranged cops discover them, decide they need the guns/supplies, and they take care of them. A fan bit Norman Reedus on the chest is exactly what it says. At Walker Stalker Con in 2015, a woman was taking a picture with Norman when she apparently looked up to the sky, started shaking, made a guttural wolf-like howl, then bit Norman so hard it left bite marks on his chest. As the resident Norman Reedus fan enjoyer, I don't know if I can blame her. Zombie Lori deleted scene refers to a deleted scene from season 3 when Rick goes off the deep end after Lori dies and he starts hearing and seeing hallucinations. One of the hallucinations he'd see was Lori in a pristine white dress. We see this a few times, but there's a deleted scene where he sees her, makes his way over to her, they have a nice moment, Rick kisses her and closes his eyes, but when he opens them again, she's a zombified version of herself. She then starts to cry, Rick scrambles away. Negan conflicted deleted scene refers to a deleted scene from the end of Season 8. This is right before the final battle, the culmination of the Savior War. It opens with Negan in bed, wide awake, well before his alarm clock goes off, the backdrop of him speaking. We cut to where the speech is coming from, and it's him addressing the Saviors, giving them a war speech. Then cuts to him in the conference room by himself, the speech backdropped once again, but this time he grabs Lucille and slams her into the table over and over and over again, until we cut back to the war speech as he wraps it up and the scene ends. This is one of the few times we see a sign of remorse or doubt from Negan concerning the war. Would have been an interesting addition, could have justified the writers keeping him alive a bit more to the audience. Morgan never actually watched Dwayne die is the theory that Dwayne didn't actually die. The confirmation we get from Morgan of Dwayne's death comes from when he was coked out in the All I See Is Red episode. So some fans posit that he never actually died, and that he either ran away after seeing his father go nuts from the bite, died by himself later and turned, or was taken by either the Commonwealth or Padre. Padre is a whole nother can of worms, but long story short, they're an overarching antagonist group in Fear the Walking Dead that kidnaps kids from struggling parents in the apocalypse as to give them a better future to rebuild the world. So it would have made sense to tie that back in there since Morgan later appeared in Fear. But to be clear, Dwayne never came back and it's all just speculation. Beth was the first member of the group to see Lucille refers to an Easter egg in Season 4. Beth sees a barbed wire bat on the ground all the way back in Season 4. This is obviously just an Easter egg. In fact, at the time of the release of this episode, the first issue Negan appears in the comic had recently been released, so that's likely why. Carol is responsible for the Anderson family massacre. This refers to Carol and her influence on Sam. We see Carol scare Sam on purpose a few times so he doesn't tell the people of Alexandria that she was going to places she couldn't. But she did more than scare him. She ends up traumatizing him, making him deeply afraid of walkers by telling him she would leave him in the forest where he'd be ripped apart by walkers, where nobody can hear him scream. So in Season 6, Episode 9, when walkers swarm Alexandria and our group has to use the walker blood method to sneak past them, including Sam, he snaps at being so close to the things he's so afraid of and receives the fate that Carol said he would, in turn causing his mother to get torn apart in the same exact scene. Ron, Sam's brother, and Jesse's son, survives, but he later blames Rick for his family's death and attempts to kill him, so Michonne has to put him down before he can. On top of that, Carol told Rick he had to kill Sam and Ron's father because he was abusive, so he did. So Carol traumatized Sam, which caused him to die, in turn killed his mom in the same scene. Later, Ron dies trying to kill Rick over the thing that Carol caused, and told Rick to kill the dad. Now, if you ask me, I think the Anderson family wasn't going to make it no matter what, but she definitely sped up the process. Deleted Eugene sex scene refers to a deleted scene from Season 8 where Eugene and Laura, a high-ranking savior, were supposed to get in some kind of deadly situation where they both think they're going to die, so they hook up, last man on earth type situation. And that's it. Just randomly made them film a scene of them banging, which, by the way, they made clear was not going to lead to any kind of romance, and then just cut it later. The man who shot Rick is the walker that bites Amy is kind of a theory and a fun fact. In the comic, this is absolutely true. The same guy who hospitalizes Rick is the walker that bites Amy. But in the show, it's a bit more ambiguous. Rick actually got shot twice in the pilot. The guy who shoots him near fatally definitely isn't the walker that bites Amy, but maybe the first guy is. I'll throw the pictures up on screen. I doubt it. They both are white trash looking with a receding hairline, and that's about it, but hey, who knows. Randall's death was actually one of the most impactful deaths in the series. Refers to what may seem like an important death at the time, but inconsequential in the grand scope, actually being a major turning point in the series. Had Rick just let Shane kill Randall earlier then, who knows? Maybe Shane doesn't go fully crazy and sticks around with the group for a bit longer. Then who knows what changes with Shane still around later in the series. A Negan and Shane scene would have fed families, I'll say that much. Imagine Shane in the lineup, he'd be dead. Let's be honest, he'd be dead. Axel was originally supposed to murder Beth and brutalize Carol. Refers to the original plan for Axel, one of the prisoners who survived the outbreak along with Oscar and the others, where he was supposed to be a deranged serial killer who slaughters Beth and near fatally attacks Carol. This would be a lot closer to the comic, since something along these lines does happen, except it's a bit more dark. The Lone Walker refers to a scene in Season 2, Episode 10, which is one of my favorite scenes in the whole show. It's simply Shane and Rick driving back to the farm after fighting 18 miles out, like the name of the episode. Shane looks out the window to a huge field completely empty other than one singular lone walker. I just find the scene so striking, and the meanings you can find in it reflect what's happening in the story at the time perfectly. The leading idea is that it symbolizes Shane's increasing isolation from the group. While I do agree with that, I also think it symbolizes how far gone the world is at this point. At the beginning of the apocalypse, everyone in our group would have freaked out over even one walker like we see in the scene, wanting to run or kill it, but now it's just part of the scenery, part of life. They're completely desensitized, and this goes for the audience as well. At first glance, this is nothing, one walker, but perhaps in the pilot, that same scene would have had a larger effect. And finally, the world's population has been reduced to 382,000 people, refers to a calculation made by a fan back in 2016. There's a YouTube video that the person who did all the calculations posted, which I'll link below. If you want more context, I'll also probably show some of the clips, where he utilizes things like how many characters they'd seen live and die to that point, which would have been end of season 6, beginning of season 7 area, along with some numbers from the comic, like how in issue 10 we learn the walkers outnumber humans 5,000 to 1. So by taking this data and extrapolating it to fit the entire planet, we get around 382,000 people left on Earth. That is about 20,000 more people than the population of Cleveland, Ohio, spread across the entire planet. Crazy. Now remember, this is only a calculation made by a fan, so it's not confirmed, and especially after seeing the spin-offs and survivors in Europe and New York, the number could be higher or it could be lower as well. Still a really cool feat from a guy who did the calculations, and a grim thing to think about. And with that, thank you again to Lazy Mobile on Reddit for making the Iceberg. I'll link the post below, as well as a big thanks to Wendigoon for the inspiration. I hope you guys enjoyed. The Walking Dead is very important to me in my life, so I wanted to do a little video on it. If you guys wanted me to do an Iceberg about the broader universe, focusing on the spin-offs a little more, or if you just want me to do more icebergs in general, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching me talk about my favorite piece of media for probably an hour, or however long this is. Too long.